All right, so I think we can we'll get started for today for our afternoon session. We will be uh, going over when we talked this morning. We spent a lot of time talking about the housing application process, what that looked like. I had mentioned that one of the really critical pieces for housing applications, but also for a lot of other things within this the world of homelessness, is obtaining like basic everyday documentation. So we are going to um, spend a little time this afternoon kind of walking through that process, what it looks like. I think one of the things that is worth knowing about people experiencing homelessness is that the documentation like birth certificates, social security cards, IDs, all of those things are among the first things that people lose and among the things that people have the most difficulty um, kind of retaining throughout the course of their homelessness. So it's not unusual for you to start working with someone that has zero documents on that list. And so we're going to talk about how to replace each and every one. We're also going to talk about the order that you need to replace those in, because when you have every other piece of documentation, getting one isn't that bad. But when you're missing more than one piece, a lot of the various IDs and things like that are required to get other ones. And so when you um, are working with someone that has literally nothing as far as that documentation, their proof of identity, we'll call it, when no one has anything to prove their identity, it's incredibly challenging to figure out where to start that process, because getting one of those pieces is contingent on having the other ones. And so we're also going to talk about where to start. Has anybody gotten a driver's license or a state ID recently?
For us, for the participant.
Just for you, because like if you've tried to get a new driver's license or a replacement of an expired, you need to have like a social security card, you need to have a birth certificate. A lot of our folks don't have any of those. And so we're gonna, we'll for anyone that's been through a process of replacing any one of these pieces, you know that you got to have other pieces to get that. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. um,
Right.
the one thing that I will say is just because you replace the document once doesn't mean that the client or constituent isn't going to lose that document immediately. So photocopies are your best friend in this line of work. Um, you generally want to make photocopies of that stuff as soon as you can. That way you've got at least some backup of the document in case people lose it, their wallets get stolen, things get destroyed. I remember we had a pretty solid mail process at Harrington Hall for making sure that people that we as the case managers got the mail first to make sure that we knew what was coming in as far as documents went, so we could photocopy them before we pass them out. And I remember a time where that process kind of, we missed a step, and somebody had gotten a copy of their social security card that we, or no, not their social security card, their birth certificate that we had been trying to get for months. And that person got the shelter staff gave the person the birth certificate the night before. I came in the morning. I had known that that birth certificate was there. I went to go look for it. I couldn't find it. I was told that the client had already gotten it. So I'm like, uh-oh, I better go get this back and get a photocopy of it before something happens. The client walks into the shelter that night. I say, oh, hey, You got your birth certificate yesterday. Do you want me to make a copy of it before something happens to it? Pulls out his wallet. It had been pouring rain that day. He holds it up. He's like, oh, this. And it was soaking wet and already ruined. Less than 24 hours that he had it. We now needed to replace this document for a third time. So photocopies are going to be your best friends once you've actually gotten these things. So let me pull up my presentation for today, and we'll start working through what we typically need when it comes to documents and how we typically go about getting them. All right. Can everybody see the can everybody see the slides? We got it up.
Yes.
Good. So some of the documents that we may need for various things in our work, whether that is a referral to coordinated entry, a housing application, a referral to another provider, the high use documents are generally going to be your state ID or driver's license, a birth certificate or naturalization certificate. We'll talk about differences when it comes to immigration status in a little bit. The way you go about getting these forms is a little bit different. People will almost always need a social security card. People will need proof of disability for a lot of things. And I'm going to talk about what that means specific to homelessness, proof of income, BCI, which is your Attorney General's office criminal background check, proof of chronic homelessness or proof of homelessness. There are some instances when you need a housing navigator referral form. Those instances are a lot less now that we're using coordinated entry. And then a veteran is always going to need a DD-214. I had no idea that a DD-214 was a thing until I started doing this work. DD-214 is the federal record of your military service and is basically the gold standard for establishing veteran status as well as time served, and also critical for establishing veterans benefits that people are eligible for. So this is a critical piece that I didn't even know existed before I started doing this work. Some other things that you occasionally need are, insurance cards. And then you may be working with somebody to get a disabled bus pass. That's a benefit that a lot of our folks are open to. So we'll talk about how to make these things happen. And I think I got everyone in the waiting room. All right. So we're going to start with a photo ID, which generally comes from the DMV. So there are there's three things now. There are three forms of ID that qualify as a photo ID, or what you may see on some applications as a state issued ID. So there is a driver's license, which is issued by the DMV. There is a state ID that's issued by the DMV that is not a driver's license. And there is now the real ID, which is an additional form of documentation. I do not have any expertise in how to get a real ID. I haven't even gotten mine yet. So we're not really talking about real IDs for most of our folks. Generally speaking, we are talking about a photo ID or a driver's license. So in Rhode Island, if someone is homeless, we are able to provide a letter of homelessness so that they can go to the DMV and get a free state ID. They don't have to pay any money for that. Any one of us, and that now includes any one of you, as a homeless service provider, um, sign this proof of homelessness and fill out that application for the DMV so that someone can go get a state ID. This does not, just to clarify, this voucher for a free state ID does not cover the cost of a driver's license. So if someone has a valid driver's license and they need to get it replaced, this voucher will not cover that. And generally, the majority of the folks that we work with don't have valid driver's licenses for a number of reasons, but there are enough people out there that do, that I generally don't recommend that if people need to replace a driver's license, I don't recommend that they give up their driver's license in place of a free state ID. Generally speaking, if somebody's driver's license is still valid, it needs to be replaced. I recommend looking for some other funding sources that are out there, and the coalition probably has funding for this to cover the $35 or $36 that it is for a driver's license. So, but just know that if someone with a valid driver's license shows up at the DMV with a voucher to replace their replace their driver's license with a state ID because it's free, they will then cancel the driver's license, and so a person will no longer have a valid driver's license and will need to retake the driver's test and all of that stuff that they need to do. So just know that if people want the free ID, that doesn't cover the cost of the driver's license, and I don't usually encourage people to give up their driver's license just to get a free ID. I think we work a little bit harder to find those extra funds to keep that driver's license active and valid for people. So in general, if people need to get a replacement driver's license, that's much easier if they have their old driver's license, right? So if somebody has or not ID, not driver's license, somebody needs to replace their ID, it's a lot easier if they still have that old ID. And so if a driver's or if an ID expires because they're only good for 2 years, if somebody has the old one or a photocopy of the old one, which is why it's so important to keep those photocopies, all they need to do is bring that in with the voucher. They get a new unexpired state ID and everything's good. That is the exception to the rule. Usually, people are getting a replacement not because their ID is expired, but because they've lost their ID or it's been stolen. In those cases, there are two things that you need to get a replacement. One of them is a ACI discharge card or face sheet, and you can get that from the public defender's office or the attorney general's office. Or from the Department of Corrections. So that discharge card, the prison ID, or the face sheet are all valid forms of identification in order to get a replacement state ID. If someone hasn't been recently incarcerated, doesn't have that discharge card or the face sheet, then they need to have a birth certificate. That can be an original or a copy. You bring in the birth certificate, you get a replacement ID. If someone needs a new state ID, which happens pretty frequently, they can do one of two things. They can bring in their social security card and use that as proof of identity in order to get the photo ID. Or they can bring in their discharge card or face sheet and a birth certificate. So if someone hasn't been to the ACI, doesn't have that discharge card or face sheet, and only has a birth certificate, they are not able to get a new photo ID, but they could get a replacement photo ID. If they have a social security card, that's the gold standard. That's all they need on that. Any questions on the photo ID and the documents that you need in the process for getting that.
I have a question.
Yes.
My name is Antoinette Noel. So I
Hi.
used to work in a respite setting, and one of the issues was proof of address.
Yep.
So could an individual use the shelter as an address?
Mm-hmm.
They could?
It depends. So some shelters will allow that, and usually for proof of address, it needs to be a physical address, not a post office box. So as long as the shelter has a physical address that counts as a mailing address, then generally speaking, that is okay. Where that gets problematic is if the mailing address that the shelter is using is different than the physical address of the shelter, or the shelter uses a post office box, then it gets a little more complicated.
Ah, okay.
But yes, but there are some other ways to establish proof of address, which I'll talk about in a minute or two.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem. So this is how you get the photo ID. Now, most people, if they've lost their ID, they've also lost their social security card. They've also lost their birth certificate. They've also lost their discharge card and their face sheet. And so generally speaking, because you need to have the birth certificate or the social to get the photo ID is generally not the first thing that we can get when someone needs to replace everything. So birth certificates. So requirements and cost vary by state. So I'm going to be talking more specifically about Rhode Island because that is where most of our birth certificates come from, but we do see a lot of birth certificates from Massachusetts that we need to get, a lot from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. In Rhode Island, the cost of a birth certificate is $30. Most agencies do get funding to cover the costs of basic documents. And so this is something that if you run into an issue where you need to get a birth certificate, talk to the coalition, see what they've got for funds for documentation. I know we have funds that are pretty readily available for folks that we're working with at House of Hope. And so, most agencies have those. Most agencies have some set aside funds for those types of things because it's something that we encounter pretty often. So in Rhode Island, in order to get a birth certificate, a person needs a government issued photo ID, so their DID. But that's a problem because in order to get a photo ID, they need to have a birth certificate, right? So this presents a challenge. Birth certificates are something that comes a little bit later. Usually what we will do, the order we'll do this in, and I should probably move these slides around a little bit so they fit better in that order. Usually what we'll do is get a social security card first because that is the easiest to obtain. And I'll talk about how to get a social security card on the next slide, but usually we get a social security card first, then we go to the DMV and get the state ID. Once we have the state ID, then we request a birth certificate. The birth certificate is going to take, in Rhode Island, takes about 2 to 3 weeks to receive. So if someone has no documents and we need to have that birth certificate, it's going to take about a week to 2 weeks to get the social security card. Once you've got the social security card, you need to make an appointment at DMV. That's going to be about another 2 weeks. And then getting the birth certificate in Rhode Island is going to be another 2 weeks on top of that. So it could take 6 weeks to get all of this documentation because you got to put it together in order. I do know other states are 6 to 8 weeks or more when it comes to getting a birth certificate. So when we're doing what we call the document chase, it's really important to start that early because as we learned this morning, a lot of the housing applications can't be submitted until we have all of those documents in hand, and that can take 6 to 8 weeks or more to collect all of these documents if they are all missing for a particular person. So the birth certificate, there is a online application form that's available through the Department of Health. I hope that the coalition will have all of those forms on hand at the shelter for you all to use. I can help them pull that information together if they don't, because I know we have all of that available on hand. So I'm going to write myself a note. So the form that needs to be filled out needs to be signed by the client. These forms can be hand delivered to the city hall of the city in which the person was born, or they can be hand delivered to the Rhode Island Department of Health, which is located at 3 Capitol Hill. This piece, if you want to go to the city hall, you have to go in person and drop the form off. If you go through the Department of Health, which is the way most of our case managers do this, it can be done in person or by mail. The city halls are a little bit tricky because you need to know where a person was born. And in Rhode Island, where you're born is the hospital you were born in. So which cities do you think we're most likely to have to try to get birth certificates from? What do you think? Where are hospitals located where people are born?
In New York?
In Rhode Island.
Oh, in Rhode Island?
So this is the amount of the rent.
What's that?
I would say Providence.
Yep. Providence and Warwick are going to be our two biggest ones because of Women and Children's and Providence Hospital located in Providence, and then Kent County Hospital is located in Warwick. We do occasionally run into folks that were born in South Kingston because of South County Hospital. In the past, there were a few other. So if you've got people that were born in the 50s or 60s, you may need to get some from Pawtucket, from Woonsocket. But generally speaking, people, don't always know which hospital they were born in. And so we don't know which city hall to go to, which is why we generally recommend that people go directly to the Rhode Island Department of Health at Capitol Hill, because they are the central repository of all of the birth certificates for everyone born in the state of Rhode Island. If someone was not born in Rhode Island, if they were born in Massachusetts, New York, any other state, you have to go through the Department of Health in those various states to get those IDs, those birth certificates. So the birth certificates that we can get easily are for folks that are born here in Rhode Island. Everything else gets a little more complicated.
Yeah, excuse me.
Yep.
Can you repeat that again for me to understand it? For the birth certificates, sir?
Yep. So birth certificates can be obtained in 2 places. They can be obtained through the city hall, but you need to know which city the person was born in, because that's the city hall you need to go to. So if someone was born at Women and Infants, that's in Providence, the records are going to be kept in Providence City Hall. If someone was born at Kent County Hospital, where they also have a very large maternity wing, you're going to need to go to the City Hall of Warwick. Those are the 2 most common. But if somebody was born in South County Hospital, that's in South Kingston. You may have to go there, which is why most of our case managers don't go to the City Hall. They go straight to the Department of Health, because the Department of Health is where all of the records for the state are kept. So if you don't know which city the person was born in, you don't know which hospital they were born in, or you can't get to one of those city halls, Department of Health is the way to go. And if you need to get one via mail, you have to go through Department of Health. All of the city halls require that you walk in to get them. The advantage to going into a city hall is that a lot of times the city hall can print up the birth certificate that day and you get it much more quickly. Department of Health, if you do it in person or request it by mail, they're going to need to print it up and send it to you. So that does create some additional delays. So if you can get to the city hall in which a person was born, a lot of times that means you get the birth certificate same day, which can matter.
Yeah.
All right. So social security card. How to get a social security card. In order to, actually, this is to replace a social security card. Hopefully, folks have already had a social security card issued to them at least once. So if you have a valid state ID, you can use that to get a social security card. But a lot of times our folks don't have that valid state ID. So the social security card will accept some other forms of identification. So if somebody has a employee identification card from their work and it has their picture and their name on it, the Social Security office will accept that. Same thing with the school identification card. That applies to elementary, secondary education, or higher education. So if a school system issues photo IDs for its students, or if somebody has a college ID, that would count. Most of our folks don't have either one of these. You can also use a military identification card as that proof of ID for a social. Again, most of our folks don't have these. The two bullets that we utilize the most when it comes to getting a social security card for a person is their health insurance card or another document with their name or address. So those other documents could include a bill, an email, or a medical record. So Nancy, this is where that piece about establishing proof of residence at a shelter can get a little bit tricky, because if the document that you need to use doesn't match up with the residence, there could be a problem. And so what we will generally do with this, first of all, the health insurance cards are pretty easy to obtain, and the health insurance cards that count are the Medicaid cards, the anchor cards, not the red, white, and blue, which are Medicare, or any other form of health insurance, whether that's Blue Cross, United, Integra, you name it. And most of these health insurance cards you can get by calling you can get by calling an 800 number, and they will send it out. Now you've got the proof you need to get a social security card. You use the social security card to get the state ID, use the state ID to get the birth certificate. So that's how you kind of jigsaw all of these pieces together. One of the things that we discovered, one of the rare benefits to the COVID pandemic, was a person's COVID test results qualified as a medical record because it had their name, date of birth, and address on it. And so for a long time, or since the beginning of the pandemic, when COVID testing started, we were using people's COVID test results as a medical record to satisfy the criteria of another document with the name and address. So if somebody has had a recent COVID test, that is something that will qualify as documentation for a social.
Can I ask a question, please? I understand what you are talking about, the social security system in our level, but I want to know, like, you are coming with a birth certificate and where you were born in that location, or you were born in Warwick, you were born in South County, you were born in Maryland, you had to go to that location and get the birth certificate. Your information, your birth certificate information is there. Online social security, you have to go to that same location, or you have to come to the Department of Health or Department of Administration.
For the birth certificates, you have to go through the Department of Health.
All right.
That's my recommendation. You can go through the town halls or the city halls. if you know where someone was born, but that has to be in person and there's some complications with that. Generally, if you know someone was born in Rhode Island and that's all you know, then you know that then the Department of Health is usually the best place to go.
Okay.
All right. So any questions on how to get the Social Security card?
Social Security card, what I was trying to bring the question is, if you bomb that place and then they got to get, I mean, Social Security number to you right there, the child got to be born in Warway or Pawtucket or Providence, and they give their Social Security card to the child. So you have to go to Providence or you got to go to Pawtucket.
So to get a Social Security card, you can go into any of the Social Security offices. It doesn't matter where the benefits are.
Oh, okay, that's
So
all.
any Social Security office is going to do the same. There is an online option to use to get Social Security cards that we didn't usually use because people needed to have an account. But with Social Security offices closed, we had to do a little bit more of that because of COVID. But generally, this is a walk-in type of thing. You you print out the application, you go in with the client with one of these forms of ID. Any Social Security office, regardless of the location, is a Social Security office that can process this request.
Okay, I understand.
Anyone. They're a nationwide database, whereas in Rhode Island, the birth certificates go by city and town. So anyone, you know, a lot of times, the Warwick Social Security office is a little bit less crowded. So a lot of people used to go to that one instead of the Providence one because the Providence one can be overwhelming. But you do the best you can. You bring people to the nearest office or the one you could get to, and you can get that taken care of. Pawtucket Social Security office was always a better option too. Just a little because it was one of the least crowded of the Social Security offices. So that might be an option if it's accessible.
Okay.
All right. So how to get an insurance card? This is really easy, assuming that the person has insurance. And a lot of our folks do have insurance now, so this has gotten a lot easier. And so this is as simple as making a phone call. If you need to get a Medicaid card, which is also known as the anchor card, if they're on SSI, you call one number. If they're not on SSI, you call another number and follow the prompts to get to Right Care, which is the type of insurance that is issuing the Medicaid anchor cards. If people are on neighborhood health plan or if they're on United Healthcare, which are two Medicaid providers, the numbers to call for that are 459-6000 for neighborhood or 1-800-587-5187 for United, and they will issue those cards with very, very few questions asked. So this is if someone shows up and they have literally nothing, no form of ID on them at all, this is always the place we start because we can get a copy of that insurance card mailed to us with no questions asked. And that insurance card opens up the ability to get a Social Security card. The Social Security card opens up the ability to get the ID. The ID opens up the ability to get the birth certificate. It takes a little bit of time. We got to jump through some hoops, but we can get it all using that process. And if somebody's on Medicare, which is that's what's known as the red, white, and blue card, they can call 1-800-772-1213, or they can go online to Social Security, which most of our folks don't want to do, or they can walk in directly to a field office and get that red, white, and blue card right there. All right. Any questions on insurance?
No, not.
All right. Proof of income. This is a tricky one that a lot of our folks will need. Proof of income is most important when it comes to housing applications, because people need to qualify for affordable housing by meeting like low income thresholds. And so the housing provider will always, always, always need proof of income. So there's a couple different ways to get proof of income depending on what you're looking for. So when it comes to SSI or SSDI, if people are on those types of public benefits, the SSI or SSDI award letter will suffice to meet those requirements. So this is something that you can get online. We've got a lot of folks, we don't have a lot of folks that want to create an account and go online and do this. So it is going online to get them is an option. Generally, what we do is call the Social Security office at 1-800-772-1213 and request that they send us an award letter as proof of income. The other option is if you have that client handy and you can transport them, you can bring them into any Social Security office. I know that they're starting to reopen after the pandemic, so this is an option again. It's generally easiest to bring the person that needs to get the award letter, but we don't have to bring the person. We can, as case managers, go on someone's behalf as long as we have a signed SSA 3288 form. And you can go, we have that in our Dropbox. Hopefully, this is a document that Rich will keep blank copies of on site at the hotel. So you can grab a copy, have the person sign it and go. Or all you got to do, the cool thing about the Social Security forms is you Google SSA and the form number, and a PDF version is going to pop up in the Google search. Social Security is really good about making these forms available online. So you pop SSA 3288 in your Google search field, and that form is going to pop right up. If someone needs proof of GPA, which is General Public Assistance, it's a type of benefit, or SNAP, which is the food stamp program, or the state supplement to Social Security, all of those programs are administered through Rhode Island Department of Human Services, not administered through Social Security. So if folks that are on SSI, they get a check from Social Security every month. They also get a check for $39.92 from the state of Rhode Island. If you run into someone that is requesting proof of that state supplement or the $39.92, you have to go get that through DHS, and there is a website for that people can use. Or you can walk into DHS. And again, DHS is starting to open back up after the pandemic. And so it tends to be a little bit easier just to have people walk in if you can. But a lot of times, most people, because the state supplement is only $39.92 and everyone on Social Security gets it, most times, most providers won't ask for that. It's the exception for people to want proof of that $39.92. You may never need to get it, but if somebody asks you for proof of the state supplement, that's what they're asking, and that goes through DHS, not through Social Security. So any questions on these types of proof of income? All right, we've got that. In addition to, if you're gonna go in person, or if you're gonna go on someone's behalf, you also need to bring a signed release of information made out to DHS and specifying the document you need. So you can bring the person, if the person's there, they can consent to releasing that information to them because it's their information and it's no big deal. If you want to go on the person's behalf, whatever the standard agency release of information is, and the coalition should have one of these as a provider, fill that out, made out to DHS, and specify that you need proof of GPA, proof of SNAP benefits, or proof of state supplement, and you should be able to get that information on the person's behalf. In the event that a person's employed, proof of income may be, proof of income is then going to be in the form of pay stubs. And the process for getting pay stubs is going to vary by employer. Some places will, you just ask the manager and they can print that out for you. Some places are going to say you need to talk to somebody in the HR department and they can print that out for you. A lot of folks, I know House of Hope has moved to an automated payroll system where all of my pay stubs are available online. You do want to check the details of each application you are requesting, because some applications will request the last month's worth of pay stubs. Some applications will request the last 2 pay stubs or the last 4 pay stubs. You have to get it right because the number of weeks of pay stubs that you're submitting are going to vary based on the applicant. So if someone is requesting the most recent 2 pay stubs, you grab those most recent 2 pay stubs and you're all set. If someone's requesting the most recent 4, you grab those 4 pay stubs and you're all set. If the application is requesting a month's worth of pay stubs, what does that mean? Well, does the person get paid weekly? Do they get paid bi-weekly? Do they get paid monthly, right? If somebody gets paid monthly, you may need to bring 4 or 5 pay stubs. If somebody gets paid every other week, you're going to need 2 or 3 pay stubs to cover that period of a month. If somebody gets paid monthly, you may only need 1 pay stub. So you got to pay attention when you're doing this to exactly what the housing provider is asking for, and you need to pay attention to the frequency of payments for the individual that you're working with. Most of our folks that are working under the table, and so getting pay stubs can be very challenging. A lot of folks, proof of income is going to be that SSI or SSDI award letter. When it gets to pay stubs, it gets a little tricky. When people are working under the table, it becomes very difficult to prove income. And this is where you're going to have to think creatively to figure out how to do that. Most of our folks, that are working under the table don't want that income reported anyway. So if there is no income, if a person has 0 income, makes $0, depending on the person or the agency that's making the request, they may have different requirements. At House of Hope, if someone has no income, all we do is ask them to sign a 0 income affidavit. So they're basically certifying to us that they have no income. We're going to accept that, no questions asked. Some housing providers, if a person has 0 income, are going to require that people fill out a IRS proof of non-filing, which basically means they are certifying with the IRS that they have not filed an income, they have not filed a recent income tax return. That non-filing of an income tax return means that they are certifying to the federal government that they've had no income. I don't question people's integrity when they do that, but I will say that if you do have income and you did not file a tax return and you certify non-filing for non-income, you are putting yourself at significant risk with the IRS. If that's a person's choice, that's their choice to make. I do usually try to warn them that if they do have income and they're certifying that they didn't, that puts them at risk. So any questions on proof of income? Most times we're talking about a pay stub or an SSI, SSDI award letter. If you run into a situation where somebody's working under the table, you may have to get creative. I'm happy to be available to answer any of those questions if they come up. I may refer to some of my outreach workers who are a lot better at figuring out this stuff than I am. All right, proof of disability is another piece of information that we often need. Proof of disability is going to be required for any housing application because most housing places give preference to people with disabilities. Some housing requires, or some housing options, some housing opportunities require disability as an eligibility requirement. If it is any housing provider that is serving people that are chronic homelessness isn't just the length of time they've been homeless, it's the length of time they've been homeless and the presence of a disability. So proof of disability is important on a lot of different ways. Another place where you might need proof of disability is if you are helping someone get a disabled bus pass for RIPTA. So in the case of proving disability, first and foremost, if a person is on SSI or SSDI, that's the gold standard for disability verification because their SSI or SSDI award letter counts as both verification of disability as well as proof of income, because you can't get SSI if you're not disabled. So if you've met the eligibility threshold for SSI, you are going to meet any disability threshold that might be in place for housing. So if somebody's on SSI or SSDI, your job is easy. If a person is not on SSI or SSDI, then things get a little bit more complicated. But one good thing to know is that the HUD threshold for disability is very different than the Social Security threshold for disability. So if you are, if somebody's looking for verification of disability to meet housing levels of disability, the HUD threshold is any disability that is considered long-term that will impact a person's ability to to obtain or maintain housing, or any disability that is likely to be improved by obtaining permanent housing. So as far as I'm concerned, anything, whether it is a physical disability, whether it is a mental health condition or a substance use condition, or something as simple as acne, right? All of these things can be improved by housing. And so as far as I'm concerned, anyone that has any condition meets HUD threshold for disability, and I'm going to sign off on it as a provider. A lot of other providers will sign off on that lower threshold for HUD disability. So in the case where a person is not on SSI or SSDI, if they have a primary care physician and they're engaged with that person, if they see a mental health counselor or they see a substance abuse counselor, any of those providers can sign off on the HUD form. One of the things that you might encounter is a provider that says, oh no, I'm not going to sign off on this disability form. When you hear providers say that, what they really think you're asking for is that you're asking for them to sign off on a disability for a SSI or SSDI disability claim. A lot of providers are really hesitant to sign off on that level of disability. I found that when I encounter that barrier, all I need to do is say to the provider, the doctor, the PCP, the nurse, whatever, nope, I'm not asking you to sign off on disability as it applies to SSI or SSDI. All I'm asking you to do is sign off on a disability that's significant enough to qualify them for housing. This is a different form and a different process. Most times, once I explain exactly what we're looking for, most medical providers will sign off on the HUD disability form. Not always the case, most times they will. So if we run into an individual that's not engaged in care or that has a PCP that still for some reason refuses to sign off on HUD disability documentation, then what we can do is go through a side door. And that side door is HUD will accept disability documentation from any provider that is licensed to diagnose or treat a specific condition. So that could be a an MD, an RN, a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed independent clinical social worker, a licensed chemical dependency practitioner. So especially for mental health and substance use conditions, we no longer have to go through a PCP to get a sign off on a mental health or a substance use condition. So this is something where we can help connect people that to providers that can evaluate them and complete the paperwork. I am an LICSW and I can and do provide HUD proof of disability for people all the time. My only and I'm happy to do that. My outreach workers that are licensed, which includes Sarah Malucci, Megan Smith, anyone at the coalition that is licensed. So Amy Ferguson, I believe, Al Gaudieri is licensed. There may be, I think there's a few other people there that have licenses. Any of us can sign off on a mental health condition or a substance abuse disorder, because all of those are conditions that we as licensed social workers are allowed to diagnose and treat. So this is something that we've created some workarounds with when it comes to this HUD level proof of disability. My only requirement is, if for me to do this, is that the person needs to be willing to meet with me so I can do a very brief screening so that I can meet my ethical standards as a practitioner. I generally am very, very broad in my interpretation of this disability criteria, and I'm very broad in my application of a diagnosable condition when it comes to these things. My only ethical standard is that the person needs to be willing to meet with me either in person or virtually, so that I can sign off on that disability. If I haven't met with the person, they're not willing to meet with me, I am not going to sign off for them because I am not able to screen them for a disability. But I can generally do that in 15 to 20 minutes if somebody's willing to meet with me. All of the licensed providers at House of Hope have that same standard, and most other licensed providers within our homeless system share that same standard. So this is one of those things where if you do need to get proof of disability, check in with the staff at the coalition and they can help connect you with a provider that can do that. Any questions on this proof of disability? All right, before we move forward, I am going to give everyone a quick 5-minute break to recharge. I need to take a quick walk and grab a quick drink to get my voice back. So I will see you all back here at 4:05.
All right.
All right,
Thank you.
no problem.
Gracias.
Hello?
Hi.
Yes, I am here. Sorry.
Did you run away, Mr.
No, I did have to take a quick bio break down the hall. So I'm just kind of sitting here collecting my thoughts, giving people a minute to roll back in.
All right, so are we coming back online now? You still need a break?
Nope, we're good. We're good.
Okay, no problem, because I
We are
did,
good. How is everyone else doing? I know I'm getting tired at this point, so I imagine you all are
listen,
feeling
if you
pretty
want
tired too.
I understand. We've been on this forever, so I hear you.
Yes. I know this is the last of the really tough things that we're going to get through. I think tomorrow is going to move very quickly. We're going to be doing a lot of small group work. We're going to be looking at case studies, kind of pulling all these pieces together. So the training this morning and this training now are really technical and they're very detailed, but it's important stuff. And the best way to get through it is to get through it. Hopefully we can all kind of be a little more re-energized tomorrow morning. And it doesn't help that it's been overcast and rainy all day. I know that's a bummer for me.
I understand, no worries, I understand.
So yes, but I am here and we are ready to get
Hold
started.
on, Bill, before you
Well,
get,
I'm really concerned about I was, I tried to log in earlier about the, what do you call it? The Slack and the talent, but I couldn't. And I was told that this afternoon I'll be able to get help to set it up, but I never got a chance. They never called my name.
no,
And I was listening the whole time.
they wasn't calling names at 12:30 or 1. You're supposed to go to your email and log in because they sent the Zoom out, so you can go to Zoom so they can work with you independently. And that's what
I did. I did do the Zoom, but then they couldn't hear me. I was calling out like a lot. I could hear everything they were saying, helping everybody. I could
Okay.
hear them talking in the background.
I mean,
But I don't know for some reason.
go back to that email, do a reply, and let them know that you wasn't able to get through, so they can send you another one and they can work with you on it. Okay.
Yeah, I was able to get the email set up, but just the other one there, the talent and the Slack.
Okay,
Okay.
that's like I said, they send out an email to you.
Okay.
Go back to that email, reply to that email, and this way they will respond to you so they can work with you one-on-one. And
Yeah.
you should be able to get that taken care of. Was everybody else able to get on? Hello?
I haven't got on my email yet.
Who is that?
Prince?
So you haven't tried it?
I'm sorry, my battery went low. And then
Yeah, I haven't got on my email yet. She let me through, but because I'm on my phone, I think my phone was giving problems. So I would need a little bit of help later.
Yeah, I need to do this on like separate. Mm.
I'm very sorry for that. My battery went low, so it went there.
Nell, can you by some means put the phone number on the chat so that I can call you later?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be fine for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I do that.
Oh.
If you can do that on the line, they cannot break off. They send a number to us. Be best to call them to understand the best of what
Yeah.
I'll be happy.
That's why they set up that Zoom meeting at 12:30.
Yeah, I
They
was on
could
the
have
whole
worked,
time.
excuse me. So they could have worked with you one-on-one.
Yeah.
That was the purpose of that. So if you didn't take the initiative so that you can work with them one-on-one, that's why we still sitting in the predicament that we are in now, where y'all not able to access certain things. And,
Yeah,
and
the
as
Zoom
y'all
meeting
know,
came on. For me,
Yeah.
it came on, but they could like it wouldn't connect. It was just going round. They didn't let me in. Like it was going round the whole time. I could hear
It was
everything what they were saying.
it was
Word
moving
for word.
slowly.
No, it wasn't like letting me join in. Like that's what I meant. Like it wasn't letting me, but I could hear them, and I couldn't send a message to tell them that I'm around, so they can let me in, so I could be able to ask questions about logging in because I
Don't you think that was a network fraud?
maybe
I'm
because
fine. I'm fine with it right now. I'm all set with it.
All right, I'm gonna put, because this is Bill's time and we're not gonna take Bill's time. I'm
Yeah.
gonna put in my, I'm gonna put in my phone number and y'all can give me a call later on today when all of this is
Yeah,
said
yeah.
and done.
After the training, yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah,
thank you, Bill.
perfect. And, I'm sorry that this is still an ongoing
Yeah.
issue. I wish I could be more helpful. Unfortunately, I don't work for the coalition. I'm just doing the trainings on the clinical stuff. So I don't have any like direct access to any more of this than you do. But hopefully Mel will be taking the lead on getting these things taken care of. So Mel, as usual, much appreciated. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah,
All right.
can I throw in?
Yep.
I think the understanding for more people, making things difficult is the Google. One day, open the Google account, and then it'll be easier to go through the Google, and then be able to get set your email and your password. It's very easy, and that's what I did.
Excellent. Yeah, that is one thing that I've noticed. If you're not a Google user, Google doesn't like you as much. And accessing all of the shared stuff has always been harder for me.
Yes.
Uh,
I was with them the
You'll
other
get
day.
10 minutes on there. 10 minutes.
How much?
5 to 10 minutes.
And then she like trying to connect the other box and then it wasn't connected.
All right. So just getting back into things here with our proof of disability. Any questions on any of this that came up over the break?
No.
No. All right. So next order of business, how to get a BCI. And a BCI is simply a report on people's criminal records in Rhode Island. For the most part, this is the only form of criminal background check that we need for anything in Rhode Island. For folks that have committed crimes out of state, they kind of get a pass because a BCI is what they look for, and only it only seems to the internal Rhode Island stuff is all that seems to matter for housing and for other things. If it's an employment verification, you may need something more than a BCI for a person, but the HR department at the agency will navigate that. For our intents and purposes, we only go and get BCIs. So all of the BCIs go through the Attorney General's office at 4 Howard Ave in Cranston. Because the the Attorney General's office is now a quarter mile from the DMV in Cranston, most people do these things in one trip, because in a lot of instances you have to go in person. The one caveat that I will say, when it comes to going to get a BCI in person, please, 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 please check with the client before you go to make sure that they don't have a warrant. And they need to be sure that they don't have a warrant. If they're not sure they have a warrant or not, don't bring them to the Attorney General's office in person, because if someone with an outstanding warrant goes to the Attorney General's office for a BCI, the Attorney General's office their name will be flagged. Someone will come out of the back door at the Attorney General's office and arrest the person on the spot. So please, please, please make sure that folks don't have any warrants for any reason before sending them, because they will not be leaving the Attorney General's office through the same door they came in from. They will be leaving through the back door directly to the ACI, where they will show up, where their next stop will be the court that issued the warrant, so they get that straightened out. Don't put people through that. Make sure you check to make sure that they don't have any warrants before you're sending them. So
Yeah, how can we know that if the person had a warrant and then maybe the person might get warrant to
yep. So you
less than
gotta
second? How can
you
we know
gotta
that?
ask the person. And the way I do this is I say, hey, we need to get a BCI. If you have a warrant, when we go to get a BCI, you will be arrested. I don't want that to happen. Is there any chance that you've got a warrant? And I'm going to say it just like that because I want them to know what the risk is. Most of our folks know what the risk is when they go to the BCI or go to the Attorney General's office to get the BCI. And when you start getting people that are very hesitant to commit to going to the Attorney General's office, that may be their way of telling you that they have a warrant and not telling you that they have a warrant. So there are two options for getting a BCI, right? So if we know that a person doesn't have a warrant, we bring them in person. They can bring their government issued photo ID. And if they have a paper copy, the temporary photo ID, that will count. So you can go to the DMV first, get that paper temporary ID, bring that to the Attorney General's office and get the BCI. They will need to pay for the BCI if they're not on Social Security. So if they are not on SSI or SSDI, they will need to bring a $5 money order made out to BCI. Or if they are on SSI or SSDI, they can bring that award letter that you've gotten previously, and they will give them the printout of their BCI on the spot. We can also go through mail if it's challenging for a person to get to the Attorney General's office, or if this is what we do at House of Hope. If we're worried that a person might have a warrant that we don't know about or that they don't know about, we will request the BCI through mail. The additional, if you're going to go through the mail process, you need to have a copy of the photo ID. You need to have that $5 money order or the SSI, SSDI award letter. You put all that in the envelope along with a notarized request form. Now, the challenge here is making sure that we can get that form notarized. We have a couple notaries on staff. Megan and Sarah, our outreach workers, are notaries. Our property manager is a notary. So this is generally something that we can do in-house. I would ask if there's anyone at the coalition that is a notary. There may be, there may not be. But if you don't have access to someone that can notarize these forms, you're not going to be able to do it by mail, which makes it a little bit more risky for people. If someone has a warrant and they try to get their BCI through mail, they will not get the BCI returned. So the Attorney General's office cannot issue the BCI to anyone that has a warrant. The worst case scenario in this is that they will also not return the $5 money order. So the person is out $5, but at the same time, they are not going to get arrested. And
I can't hear you clearly. I think someone is distracting me with
just looking
the
to see
background.
who's not muted.
Yeah, somebody didn't mute. I don't know who it is. I could hear a TV on.
That might be. Usually I can figure that out pretty quick.
Okay.
So
It's Mel.
Oh, did we get it? We got it. All right. We are good. So any questions on the how to get a BCI or the risks associated with getting a BCI for our folks? No. All right. This one's pretty simple as far as things go. The hard part is just making sure that the person doesn't have a warrant. All right, one other thing one additional thing that you may or may not need to do in your role is verify a person's chronic homeless status. This is something that's required for any program that has a eligibility requirement of chronic homelessness. There are a lot of, this is something that really takes some experience in working one-on-one with people. But so you may or may not be doing this. This may or may not be done in the HMIS system. But I do want you to know what we look for when it comes to verifying chronic homeless status, so that you can start looking. If you've got folks that are new to us or new to the system, that have only been in HMIS for a couple months, but they're saying they've been living outside for 3 years and no one's contacted them, those are the folks where there may be some additional documentation burden. So just a reminder on what it means to be chronic homeless. So first of all, a person must have a HUD level of disability. So that is that, any condition, any long-term condition that will benefit from long-term housing. So any mental health condition, any substance use disorder, the vast majority of physical health conditions, any of those are generally considered to be conditions that would be improved by permanent supportive housing, right? Like if you've got an anxiety disorder and you're worried about where you're staying, not having to worry about your staying is going to improve your anxiety disorder. If you've got a PTSD or trauma history, and being housed is going to alleviate some of the issues associated with the PTSD. If you have a addiction or a substance use disorder, all of the research in the world says that stable housing is one of the best things that you can do to move forward with your recovery. So when it comes to this disability, this is a thing that I worry about the least, but it has to be there. Usually we can find something and make it work in order to get people qualified for housing. The trickier part is this documentation of homelessness. So in order to meet chronic homeless definition, you need to be homeless for 1 year or more continuously. So 12 months consecutive homelessness. Now, in order to accrue a month of homelessness, you need to be homeless for 1 night in that month. So theoretically, someone could be homeless for 12 nights and still qualify as chronic homeless because they've had 1 night in each month and they earn those 12 months of homelessness. This is generally only important when it comes to documentation. Usually people are homeless for more than 1 month or more than 1 night per month. They're usually homeless for consecutive months or consecutive nights at a time, where they're staying in shelters or staying outside. But a lot of times, depending on the shelter or the place that a person is staying, we can only find proof of that homelessness for 1 night. And that 1 night per month is all that matters for that month. So the other verification, the other type of chronic homeless is somebody that was episodically chronically homeless. And in this case, that would be a person that experienced 12 months or more of homelessness during 4 or more episodes in the last 3 years. So you basically start with today. Today is July 3rd, June 3rd, not July yet. Today is June 3rd. So if someone was homeless for any 1 night on June 1st or June 2nd, that's enough to get them the month of June homeless. And then you start counting back 36 months and you've got to find 12 months during that 36-month period where they were homeless. It is important that there be 4 more episodes, so there be some distinctions in that is something we always can find a way to work around. If they've got the 12 months in the past 3 years. We figure out how to break those into episodes down the road. Don't sweat that one a ton. There are some very, very good people at the coalition, including Amy Ferguson, who can help you with that. So there are some templates available. I would ask the coalition what template they use. My guess is that they're going to use the one through coordinated entry. Working for the agency that also operates coordinated entry is going to make your life a lot easier with this, because it's much easier to verify chronic homeless status in collaboration with someone who has HMIS access. So any questions about this verification of chronic status?
I have a question.
Yep.
So this is Antoinette Noel. So
Hi.
what do you do in a situation that a family, a mother and a family come in with that are illegal immigrants, and they use somebody else's information, them and their children, to get in? But then once you have this family in the shelter, everybody is an illegal immigrant. What do you do in a situation like that?
I don't know on that one, because every single shelter is going to have their own policies on that. So we at House of Hope have no restrictions on immigration status for accessing emergency shelter. So for us in an emergency shelter, that is not a problem. They enter the shelter and continue to use the shelter, right? We are not going to kick someone out of one of our emergency shelters because they are not legal or not documented as legal in this country. And in my experience, many, many more folks are legal but undocumented than are straight up illegal in this work. Usually, most of the people that came here that we're working with came to the United States legally under a visa, under an asylum situation, or the American Dreamers Act. Or they were born here but their parents weren't. And so generally speaking, folks got here legally, but because of the nature of homelessness, a lot of things happen that prevent them from renewing those green cards or prevent them from following through with the citizenship process. So they have generally become undocumented. And so at that point, we're going to start working on trying to replace or get that documentation. So that is not an issue for our agency when it comes to emergency shelter. Like, we understand that those are the challenges. Now, that's my agency. I can't speak for every other agency. Where the challenge is going to be, what do we do with that person now that they're in our shelter? How do we get them out? Because in order for them to qualify for permanent supportive housing or any other affordable housing, they're going to need to have that documentation. And this is where it gets tricky. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to work with folks with challenging immigration statuses, but this is an art form, and this is a place where I rely on agencies that have true expertise in this and don't do a lot of this work on my own.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's see, we did insurance cards. Yes, we did that. Disabled bus passes. RIPTA has a fairly convoluted process for getting disabled bus passes, and they like to change it all the time. And they like to make it hard for people to get those disability bus passes. We are doing a lot of advocacy right now to get RIPTA in line with HUD and other agencies as far as documentation of disability. So right now, I, as a licensed independent clinical social worker who is licensed by the state of Rhode Island to diagnose and treat any mental health condition or substance abuse disorder, cannot provide disability documentation to RIPTA because I'm not an MD. Even though I have that right in every other setting, I don't have that right when it comes to RIPTA. So the RIPTA disabled bus pass is incredibly complicated. It changes all the time. But in the best case scenario, in order to replace a disability bus pass, people will need a copy of the state ID, proof of income. So this can either be SSI or SSDI award letter, or a tax return or proof of non-filing from the IRS, because that's going to document that they are disabled and they are low income, the two eligibility requirements for a disability bus pass. If someone has never had a disabled bus pass, they need to have a copy of a state ID and a copy of a state ID and an SSI award letter or proof of disability from the Providence Center or from an MD. That's one of the changes that they've made since this presentation was put together. The SSI award letter is your gold standard when it comes to a disabled bus pass, because that means that Social Security has already determined this person to be disabled. There's no further proof needed. If a person isn't on SSI, they need to have proof of disability from the Providence Center or from their own MD. Those are the only two places they will accept that proof of disability. My proof of disability doesn't count for RIPTA. Something we're working on changing, but it makes life for our folks really complicated because they have to be engaged with a primary care doctor who's willing to provide that documentation. Veterans. So I had mentioned a DD 214. It is a document that's used to determine access to healthcare and benefits. It contains information about dates of service, rank, achievements, so medals and things like that. And it also contains information about the type of discharge. So some of the types of discharge that you may see are honorable, general under honorable, other than honorable, or dishonorable. So generally speaking, a veteran needs to have an honorable or general under honorable discharge in order to receive benefits from the VA. And that includes HUD-VASH vouchers. So anytime a veteran is applying for veteran-specific housing, which is the VASH program, they're going to need to have this DD 214 to get that. And so these DD 214s can be obtained through the VA. I've included contact information for Sean Lonergan, who is the VA's outreach worker. He has been in his position as an outreach worker at the VA longer than I've been in this field. I met him on my third day of my internship. So Sean is truly an expert on veterans homelessness and knows how to navigate a lot of these things. He also knows which programs people with other than honorable discharges might be eligible for. So he is a great contact person if you're working with a veteran that isn't able to get a DD 214 or has any questions. Let's see. So citizenship, there are some expected processes to go through with this, to get citizenship documentation, but there are always additional challenges, hoops, and issues when people are trying to obtain their citizenship documentation. Even in the best case scenario, assume that there are going to be unanticipated challenges when it comes to citizenship. So, these are the form numbers that you need to get a permanent resident or a green card. These are the form numbers you need to get a naturalization certificate. But generally speaking, we refer out to the experts on citizenship issues. And in Rhode Island, the experts on citizenship issues are Dorcas International Institute, located on Elmwood Ave in Providence. They are my go-to when I have citizenship questions, and they are everyone's go-to when there are citizenship questions. So unless you've navigated this before and you really, really know what you're doing, Dorcas is going to be your best friend. I don't want to get too much more in depth about issues with citizenship and challenges with citizenships because it's so unique and individualized and so convoluted and complicated that I'm not an expert on it. I refer out to the experts who are Dorcas.
Yes, can I flow in, please?
Yep.
Something I'm kind of a little confused, and you just brought it up, but you're trying to clear it for everybody to understand it. For the citizenship, anyway, I don't know how can I ask the question. So I just want you to give me the little diagram of to understand for what. Sometimes if you are a citizen, you bring somebody and that person become a citizen. So that person trying to become a citizen, how can it work? How can you do for that person to be a citizen?
So I can give you what I know about the process. It's not going to be good, but I do want to see if there's anyone in the room because we do have a lot of folks in the room, and I'm wondering if someone else has had more direct experience with helping people navigate the citizenship process.
Oh, okay.
And if not, I'll take a stab. I don't have a problem with that, but I do know that there are a lot of other people in the room and this is not an area of expertise for me.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So my general understanding of the process is that there are multiple paths to citizenship for people depending on their reason for entry, right? So if someone is an asylum seeker, I believe the path to citizenship is very different than if someone comes in on a student visa or a work permit or something like that. I
Right.
know that generally there is a application process for citizenship. There is a sponsorship requirement. So you need to have a citizen, usually a family member that's able, not always, but usually that's who ends up doing it, that's willing to sponsor you and kind of take responsibility for your, for making sure that the paperwork gets filled out, that you go through the application process. They're supposed to do some mentoring. And then at the end of this whole process, which I believe takes several years, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe takes several years, then there is a citizenship test that people need to take, and then you are eligible for citizenship. There were a lot of barriers put in place by the Trump administration to make it really hard for people. I believe that some of this may get easier, but to the best of my knowledge, that's my understanding of how this process works. I also know that anything that happens along the way counts against you and makes it even harder. And that's the experience that our folks have had. Homelessness, technically, part of that sponsorship is that the sponsoring citizen is giving you a place to live and making sure that you have employment. And if you're homeless, technically you're not in compliance with that sponsorship piece, and that could put your citizenship application at risk. And those are the kind of challenges that our folks have.
Yes, if you are a resident for 5 years, then you can apply for your citizenship with good behavior. But if you have any criminal record within
Yep.
5 years, then you
Yep.
have to go for another 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it works.
Yep, and that I've worked with plenty of folks that have had all kinds of immigration status, from student visas to work permits to asylum seeking, that have had, unfortunate and unintentional run-ins with the law, and that's derailed their citizenship process. And there is a whole cottage industry of attorneys and lawyers that help people navigate these. And they are expensive because there's high demand and they're not always available to our folks. But if there are there are lawyers on staff at Dorcas that do some of this work at a very low or no fee. All right, let's see, SNAP and GPA. Just to clarify, SNAP is food stamps. The program is used to be called the Food Stamp Program federally. They changed the name to SNAP to make it a little bit more inclusive and a little less stigmatizing. Most of our folks are still going to refer to it as food stamps. So if you hear food stamps, think SNAP. If you hear SNAP, think food stamps. It's one and the same. GPA is General Public Assistance, which is cash assistance only for people that are pending Social Security. So as you may or may not know, usually when someone applies for Social Security, they do not get those Social Security benefits right away because there is a disability determination process that requires a comprehensive and exhaustive review of medical records. There are legal proceedings that need to happen. There is a denials and appeals process. And so GPA is designed to be available for people who are navigating that process. GPA is either $200 a month or $50 every other month, depending on what you qualify for. I'm sorry, $50 every other week, depending on what you qualify for. It's not much. It's hard to get. It's getting harder to get. When I started working in this field, there were a lot more people on GPA. Most people find that it's not worth it anymore and don't bother applying. But if you do work with somebody that wants to get GPA, both GPA and SNAP are administered through the Department of Human Services through Rhode Island. And so all of these applications can be obtained by dropping in to any DHS office or by going online to using the links that I provided in this training. Health insurance. This is something that's changed a lot and has gotten a lot easier. People can go through Health Source RI, which is a website that does, in order to begin an application, or they can call the Health Source navigators at 1-855-840-4774. They can also go to any of the drop-in centers that exist. I think, you know, a couple years ago, there were a lot fewer people that didn't have health insurance. Most of the folks these days do have it, but if you run into someone that doesn't, Health Source RI is how you go about connecting them to Medicaid. And everyone is eligible for some type of insurance in the state of Rhode Island. It all depends on what exactly that looks like. Let's see, SSI and SSDI. There are a couple phone numbers you could call to check on the status of an existing application. Or you can call the Providence office at 877-335-4113. I doubt that you all will be completing any Social Security applications for people. Most people have they completed already, and if they don't, there is a process that some of our case managers use called SOAR, and that's generally the way that we get people into that. The need for SOAR is being tracked through coordinated entry these days. So my guess is that completing an SSI or an SSDI application is not something that you're going to need to do for folks. There are probably going to be other ways for them to get that, but you may need or want to call in and check on the status of an existing application. This slide is going to outline how you do those things. And then here's my slide on how to start a new application. A person can initiate on their own by filling out an application or going to Social Security. Generally not recommended. you can reach out to the SOAR program, and that is run through the coalition. So the same agency that's operating this hotel, the same agency that's doing coordinated entry, also operates the SOAR program. Not sure if you've met all their staff yet, but Lindsay Cutler is the SOAR lead over there. And if you are interested, you can be a SOAR case manager as well. There is a very intensive training that's available online that shows you how to use this SOAR process. It's an incredible training. I've done it. I learned more about benefits in that training than I've ever learned anywhere else. So if you're feeling like this might be the career for you, now that you've got your feet in the, now that you've kind of dipped your feet in the pool working at the hotel, you think this might be a population you want to work with, reach out to somebody at the coalition, have them connect you to Lindsay so you can get that SOAR training, and you add that to your resume, and it's a great skill set to have. So that's a little public service announcement. You can always, people can always reach out to a lawyer. There are law firms that specialize in benefits applications. Generally don't recommend this either because lawyers like to slow roll this because they get paid more the longer it takes. So generally speaking, we want to get people access to SSI or SSDI through the SOAR method. Here's a couple links for some other resources. All of these resources are on the coalition website. I don't hand out copies of the resources anymore because they are updated so frequently that they tend to be out of date. So there's a Rhode Island shelter guide that's going to have information about shelters, and there are street sheets. They're going to have lists of all of the service providers in various areas. All of these are available on the coalition's website. Hopefully, as part of the hotel project, the coalition will be printing some of these out and keeping them on hand so you can give them out to people. So if you have people that come in and have questions about resources that you're not sure about, the street sheets are how you refer people to the agencies that can answer those questions. All right. So we just covered a lot of ground in the past hour and 45 minutes. What questions do y'all have?
No questions. I know majority of the stuff. So just
All right. What's that, Felicia?
it's just a refresher, so I know majority of the stuff.
Awesome. Good. Awesome. All right. And like I said, what's that?
No, excuse me, Bill.
Yep.
Are we finished? I got to break out real quick.
Yep. We are pretty much done. Just checking in with folks to see how they're doing.
All right. Thank you.
All right. And you know, again, I will apologize for the training style on the 2 trainings today. This is just dry stuff. There's no way to make it exciting. We just get through it. I promise you we'll get to some good, fun stuff tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you, Bill.
All right. I'll see you everyone tomorrow morning at 9. I believe we're starting directly with me at 9 o'clock. So I'll see you then.
See you then.
I'm sorry, we can't even hear you with that person talking in the background.
You're muted.
No respect, man.
So I'll see you all 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
No problem.